Really excited for our final module today. We are going to do a few things. One, we're going to try to put all of these pieces together. We have heard from 4 amazing speakers on 5 topics over the course of this program. And each one of them, from their own kind of organizations and positional roles, like does change leadership from A to Z. But we really ask them to focus in on one aspect of the process. So hopefully we put a lot of tools in your toolbox. So many tools, in fact, that you may not really know what to make of them all. And so that is what we're really hoping to do today, is to kind of run through some of the highlights, put it all together in a coherent process wheel, and then take the second half of the day to really think about how this might apply in your contexts, specifically related to the change project that you're thinking of leading either on your campus or as a part of a team, supporting one another in this work, and which tools might be most helpful to you. Where are you starting in your process? And then, we'll just be really hopefully making some good progress on all of the aspects related to our capstone. One thing that, let me just see if I can advance here, that I learned many years ago when I was working with 55,000 Degrees in Louisville. We worked with Civic Lab back then, and this was in like 2014 or something, when I first met Jack and his partner, John. And they're like, most collaborative efforts fail simply because there's no agreed upon process for working together. And that is where we make, not just the systems that we're working with, try to make the invisible visible, but it's also this process that we're trying to guide and lead our partners through. How can we make our process visible, instead of just invisible and kind of figuring out, okay, what do we do next? But like really having a plan and an approach to our change leadership. So I'm really excited because I think that we have made some really good progress on developing out not just a clear process and an approach, working collaboratively on complex issues, but also just putting enough tools in our toolbox that we can really facilitate our way through to the next step. So this is a pretty typical process wheel. And, I've used it so many times. I've used it at the program level to make change. I've used it at the department level to make change, used it at the institution level to make change and guide change. And the first place that you start is here at the red circle, and really identifying clearly that issue that we agree to work on together. You then go through convening the right people that need to be a part. Who are your key stakeholders in this ecosystem? Of course, the relationships are the foundation of all progress that you will make and the success that you will have. You start gathering that data to create your current state picture. From your current state picture, you vision, well, what do we want our future state picture to look like? That future state helps you identify the tests of change that you want to implement. And then you make sure you have clear metrics and deliverables to see if you've been successful, or as you go on to the continuous improvement of it, are we going to adopt, adapt, abandon to scale? And then once you, of course, changed the world and made it a wonderful place to be, you can kind of start over at a new issue or continue to tweak. So I have gone through and tried to map some of the tools that we have talked about over the last 5 modules to this process wheel. And so we have our common goal statement, our ecosystem approach to organizing around contexts instead of problems, our adaptive leadership strategies and processes, and the switch principles that we just talked about with Dana in session 5. We've got tools around journey mapping and empathy mapping and process mapping. We have this design thinking process, about, ideating and prototyping, creating the how might we statements to really vision out that future state. Then when we really get into implementation, we want clear aim statements that are kind of SMART goals, that also go to driver diagrams, and then on to a plan, do, study, act infrastructure for mapping a continuous improvement cycle. And then once you get to the end of your improvement cycle, really thinking about, okay, what's next and how do we scale? So this wheel is a little bit of a comprehensive picture, I think, of the different pieces of this puzzle we've been putting together. But now we're going to go through each one of our modules in just a little bit more depth. Now, I will say this is going to be fast and furious. And in the Impact exChange, you have full access to the full meeting recording presentation, as well as the full deck. This is just really highlighted and selected, curated content. So it's just a snippet from each of our modules. Our first module, was with Jack Hess with Civic Lab, and we really were looking at this ecosystem approach to collaboration. And some of the things that I really took away, one is that good collaborative processes really are focusing on the system and how we work together. It is putting the responsibility for improvement into everybody's hands. It's the Toyota example where anybody along the line can pull the cord. And, other lessons learned through that, collaborative process was around going upstream for challenges and not downstream where they show up. So that's kind of the look with your feet mantra for when you're trying to really identify what is the source of this challenge that we keep kind of facing in a recurring way. And then also, I love this last one, redefining the role of the leader. The leader is not the authoritarian decision maker. The leader is the facilitator of the process. In kind of collective impact work, it's the backbone support. It's the person that wakes up every day focused on this work, this project, this collaboration, these partners, and they do everything in their power to keep the group moving forward together. I will just say, if you guys want to add to any of my reflections on these this content, please do. You can either raise your hand and share with the group, or you can also kind of put comments in the chat that I can read out for folks. Another thing that I thought was really helpful from the Civic Lab from our first session was really understanding what type of problem are we dealing with, and to recognize that different approaches to problem solving will work in different contexts. When we have very clear processes or challenges, we manage them. It's efficient, it's large scale, it's repetitive. So we are just kind of managing this process over and over and over again. If we have something that's a little more complicated, there's multiple steps to it. Let's take academic advising, for example. Perhaps, that is something that is very individualized. It's going to be customized. You might need specialized knowledge in order to be a point for this work. But you can still solve all of these challenges, or get these students registered for the right classes that will help them march toward their degree plan. It is complicated, but you're there to provide that customized support, and you can solve that challenge or problem. And then when we're looking at complex challenges or problems, complex issues, that's where we are actually looking to dissolve the challenge. This will take you might not even have done this before. You might not have a clear understanding of exactly what the challenge is, but together you can try different things. And from your learnings, you'll be able to make progress and move forward, and hopefully ultimately dissolve the barrier that may be in the way. And then when you're dealing with chaos, they say just a triage, you kind of have to have this command central where a lot of the information is flowing so that it can all be coordinated because it's coming in from so many different directions and it's it's much less manageable. And so one of the ways that we organize our teams and organize our collaborative efforts is around these contexts. And so if we are in a clear context, we've got a service team and we manage it. And that service team provides the same service kind of over and over in a very high quality way. And we can scale this and it's pretty repetitive. If we have the complicated, we've got a solution team. I love that word, and they're really effective at this individualized customized service. In the complex situations, I always think of basic needs work when I think of how complex, and intertwined some of those experiences are for students. That's where we have a design team. And I will just put in a plug for Arion's Solve for One, Extend to Many workshop that Civic Lab will be leading on, I believe, April 14th. Is that right, Ariane? Maybe put that in the chat if you don't mind, because that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be really working with Civic Lab to teach our teams how to solve for one and extend to many. So that design team approach. And then the leadership team, really, because in an ecosystem, you're going to have all three of these different types of challenges or issues that you're working on simultaneously. And so making sure that your leadership team is able to see how these dots connect and keep it going. We refreshed on the 4 ways of treating problems. You can ignore it. And you can either by not being aware of the problem, by having no interest in the problem, or possibly having no capacity to address the problem. Those are kind of real things that I know that we face. And sometimes it's frustrating, when you see people just kind of absolving or I can't do it right now, kind of an approach to some of our challenges that we face. Resolution is employing behavior previously used in similar situations. It's a little bit more dealing with short-term effects or symptoms and not necessarily causes. So we can resolve this challenge right now. Here, I have maybe an emergency aid grant, or here, come to the food pantry, but we're not really helping address the financial insecurity or the food insecurity that a student may be facing in a more chronic way. Solution is to achieve the best possible outcome, optimizing the situation, but it doesn't, necessarily or fundamentally change the nature of things. So we do want to create a new solution that will hopefully yield the best possible outcomes. But we also, situations change, and so we'll have to continue to adapt and monitor. Dissolution, as we kind of mentioned earlier, is the redesigning of the system to eliminate the problem, so we don't end up solving the same problem over and over. And then the last chart I'm just going to show you, I'm not going to go through this, but this is just a great reference as you're thinking about the different contexts and the different challenges that you may choose to address through your capstones or just in your daily work. If it's a manage approach or a solve it approach or a dissolve it approach, you can kind of think through these different aspects as you're trying to really clearly identify and frame, build the team, track your progress, etc. So those were some of the key highlights. There was so much gold inside of that very first module that we had back in September. So I really recommend going through if you want to review the whole kind of deck and pull out other pieces that are of value to you related to your work. But I think that, key principles for me, just really understanding what a good collaborative process looks like, seeing the ecosystem of the work that we're doing and being kind of aware of how we approach a problem is really important related to the context. And then thinking of the different ways that we can treat problems. Any questions or thoughts that you'd like to add on Module 1? Okay, love it. Okay, so then we went in and we worked with Lena Blackstock with the Process Practice Studio, and she led the next 2 sessions for us on design thinking and innovation, and then journey mapping to blueprint design. So, really this concept of design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation that balances desirability, feasibility, and viability. And so the point of being human-centered, I feel like that's everything that we do every day in higher ed. We are student-centered. And so our approach to trying to figure out how do we address the challenges that we know our students are facing, like it really must center the student in trying to better understand the challenge. And sometimes we don't always do that part of it. We see students are having this challenge, but then we assume, oh, well, this must be here. Let's do this. This is going to be the solution, as opposed to bringing in that user input or the student input into the design process and really the thinking process of how could this be better? So one thing about the human-centered piece is that empathy is the foundation. And so it really starts with thinking, with understanding the experience of students, faculty, or staff, and engaging these stakeholders to help uncover needs, challenges, and motivations. Desirability, quick definition, it's about the user needs and wants. How much value add does this provide to the actual user, the student or the faculty or staff, whoever your target audience may be? And it ensures that the programs, tools, and services resonate with that target audience or that target population. Feasibility is about the technical and operational considerations. So feasibility assesses whether proposed solutions can be realistically implemented within our existing resources and infrastructure. I think feasibility is sometimes one of those, like we might dream super big about a great idea, but it's like, oh, well, our platform can't do that. Why not? But if you're really going to try to make the big change that you want, like considering the platform limitations is going to be an important part of can we move forward with this idea. The viability is around the business or the economic sustainability. So it ensures that new initiatives align with your mission and your financial model, which is and really ensures that they're sustainable over time. If this works and we prove that this is an effective solution for whatever the challenge may be, can we sustain it? Can we scale it? Is there a built-in kind of ROI that really works with our financial model or our mission and what we need to invest in to make the case for that? Okay, so just a little bit about the process of design thinking. We talked a lot about this problem framing and problem solving. And problem framing involves really defining and understanding the issue at hand. So articulating the right problem to solve can really significantly impact how effective your solutions are. If it's too broad, if it's not well defined, if maybe it slightly misses the mark from the actual problem, like have you ever solved a problem or you thought you solved a problem for students, but then they say, well, that wasn't really my problem. So we really need to take time to frame what it is very focused in that we're trying to do. And I will say, like, this diverge and converge is we do this all the time. When we diverge, that's our brainstorming. That's when we're thinking about so many different ways and approaches to do something. And you don't, limit the ideas that get thrown on the board. Everything is open and welcome. And then when you converge back in, it's when we prioritize or we put each of the new ideas through the desirability, feasibility, viability tests. And we make sure that, based on all of these other factors, we are voting, we're kind of converging down, narrowing down our ideas. And it can be an iterative process. Throughout design thinking, framing is not static. So teams may need to revisit and refine initial problem statements based on insights that may be gained during the diverge or converge process. And when we think about in the design thinking approach, problem solving is significantly enhanced through the processes of prototyping and testing. And so that's where we take those ideas that we've converged on, that we think are going to be the good solutions, but now we need to test them out. And prototyping is kind of creating tangible representations of ideas, piloting different things, tracking those metrics or the impact of those, and then seeing if we need to refine or iterate. And one other note in this area is around the importance of testing and getting your student feedback. So testing involves evaluating the prototypes with real users, with real students, to gain insights into their experiences, preferences, and pain points. And that feedback is essential for creating student-centered solutions. I think that there's a lot of overlap between the design thinking approach to prototyping and testing, as well as the continuous improvement approach, where we are, doing tests of change, and then, do we adapt, or abandon to scale? So I really like that the way that some of the presenters gave us these different tools. It might be there's two different tools here that can do the same thing. And so you can kind of think about which process works best for you or which one you want to try first or second. Kind of moving on, another piece of our work in design thinking, and this is really that student-centered piece, is the importance of empathy maps, and kind of creating these student personas or these target population personas, because you might be addressing issues that are not necessarily student-facing. And so an empathy map is a collaborative visualization tool used to articulate what a user thinks, feels, sees, hears, and does in relation to a specific experience or process at our institutions. And our goal is really to gain a deeper understanding of our students or of our users, to inform the design process and help teams really create solutions that really meet the needs. I liked the example that we did in this session, or maybe it was even we've done empathy maps in a lot of different workshops through the collaborative. So maybe I'm thinking of a specific, like I know with our first transfer workshop, we had student personas, and then we kind of looked at the student experience around how are they preparing for transfer? What are they thinking about transfer? What do they hear about transfer? What do they do next? And so it really puts you in the student's shoes. And I think that is just something that, even though you're not necessarily asking students to fill this out, you could, but you do probably just going through that activity of putting yourself in the student's shoes to fill out an empathy map is a really good way of creating empathy. Okay, the next thing that I thought would be a really good tool is around the how might we templates. And this is really when I think on the process wheel, this was kind of around that creating our future state picture piece of the work. So you've got some really good current state pictures, some good data and information, and the next step is, what do we want the future to look like? And so you're kind of taking your problem of you're taking your opportunities really, and you're putting them in a sentence that really helps guide the next steps of the work. So how might we a question format that transforms problem statements into open-ended prompts, and it's really followed by a specific challenge or goal. I would love to see in your capstone projects, kind of what is that how might we statement that's really guiding what it is that you're hoping to do through your work together. Using how might we questions in the design process. It's good in brainstorming sessions. So people will use how might we questions as prompts during brainstorming, encourage team members to generate as many ideas as possible. It can also help in prioritization. So after generating ideas, teams can use voting or other methods to prioritize the most promising solutions. And then it's also helpful in iteration, as how might we questions can be refined and adapted as the project evolves. Okay. That is my wrap up of our second module on design thinking and innovation. So just some of the tools that I pulled out was that human-centered design principles, problem framing and solving with the diverge and converge, empathy mapping tool, as well as the how might we statements. Any other things that you all think are important to add related to this area? All right. Journey mapping to blueprint design. This one had a lot of content in it. I know it seemed really fast and furious and pretty complex. It's a pretty complex process to facilitate. But I mean, I think once you have the basics, you can really learn so much, and this would be one of those things that I would want to just practice it. How can I practice this journey mapping or this process mapping so that I can really get good at seeing how to do this because it's so relevant and would be so helpful in a lot of our work. I think that the first kind of foundation to lay is just to really consider what is a good service. And as you kind of look at these 15 elements of a good service that are on the screen, and then maybe you're thinking about your services that might be in your areas, whether it's residence life or advising or career development or whatever the case may be, do you feel like you're checking all of these boxes? So a good service is easy to find. It allows the student or the user to get what they came to do. It clearly explains its purpose, set expectations, works in a familiar way. That one, it makes me wonder if in higher ed we do anything in a familiar way. Requires no prior knowledge. It's agnostic of organizational structures. Requires the minimum possible steps to complete. Woof. I giggle at myself. Okay. It's consistent, has no dead ends, is usable by everyone, encourages the right behaviors, it responds to change, can clearly explain why a decision has been made, and makes it easy to get human assistance. So those are just some good best practices, if you will, as you're kind of thinking about, okay, when I am mapping my process, these are the points that I might look at. If I don't feel like I'm hitting a specific element, this would be a great opportunity for improvement. So in the service design piece, service design is an approach that focuses on creating and improving services to enhance user experience. So one of the key concepts in service design is the idea of zooming in and zooming out. And zooming in involves focusing on the specific touch points, interactions, or elements of a service. It's kind of the finer details of the work, getting into the details. And then the zooming out takes the broader view of a service ecosystem, considering the overall context, stakeholders, and environmental factors that influence the service experience. So I think like in our different roles, we might have more of a zoom in. I'm always kind of boots on the ground, working directly with students, or, sometimes we sit more at the zoom out and we're kind of managing multiple areas or teams or services. It's really important to have both of those perspectives on your design team as you're trying to make sure that you're taking all of these important factors into account. In addition to the zoom in, zoom out, you have both front stage and backstage elements of your service. So front stage is like clearly that student facing. These are the direct interactions and touch points that your students experience directly. It includes visible actions, communications, and engagements that occur on their journey. The backstage encompasses all the processes, systems, and interactions that support the front stage, but may not be visible to your student. So this includes internal operations, workflows, support systems, technology platforms that enable the service delivery. And so, in the service design process, distinguishing between front stage and backstage elements is essential for creating an effective user-centered experience, and ultimately deliver a better service. Now, this is kind of that mapping piece of the work. So in a journey map, the key moments above the line or below the line. Front stage is above the line, backstage is below the line. And so thinking about the key moments, okay, the student, applies for admission. Okay, what's the backstage next key moment? We review their materials and request whatever may be missing. Another backstage moment. And then finally, we send out a communication that the student experiences. And then they have to respond. And then we have to do something. And so, as you can see, the journey can't happen with only looking at the students' interaction and their touch points. You have to also know the process behind the scenes. And so that's where so much of our work really needs to be uncovered. Now, let's say that you went through a process mapping activity with your team and you saw the student key touch points and key moments, and then you also had mapped the institutional, the backstage key moments and touch points. Stephanie. And then what does it mean to do blueprint design? What is the difference? How do we translate the actual journey or the current process into a blueprint for the future state picture? And that's kind of where, I know in our admissions redesign project, we're doing student journey mapping with the high school seniors and looking at their real-time journeys and their real-time touch points in these key moments. And we're going to be working with them on informing, well, what would be your ideal college-going admissions experience? What are some of the frustrations that you had, or the delays in responsiveness that you might have experienced, or the frustrations with needing to do something over because it didn't work the first time? And so really trying to engage the user in the blueprint design of what would be ideal and how would they like it to be. And then, you have to map that against all the feasibility and the viability on the back end of the process. So creating the service blueprint, kind of step-by-step process. First, define the service and clearly outline the service being analyzed and its objectives. Identify the student actions or the student journey. Map out the steps students take when engaging with the service. Detail the front stage and backstage actions. Document the interactions of your own team and internal processes that support the student journey. Include support processes. Identify any additional processes necessary. So they might not be directly in your wheelhouse, but it's critical. So if you're the admissions, area, but you have to work super closely with financial aid, so they're going to need to be a part of the overall process in a support component as well. Visualize your physical evidence. Incorporate elements that the student experiences during their journey. So this is the email. These are the emails that they receive, or these are the forms that they need to fill out. So that's kind of the evidence of the journey. And then review and refine and collaborate with stakeholders to review your blueprint, which is kind of your future state picture, your gold star, what you would love to see happen, to ensure that this is the desirability of your student to begin with. So related to journey mapping to blueprint design, we've talked about what makes a good service, the front stage and the backstage elements of overall, what impacts the student's experience, and then looking at how might we or how could we journey map and then translate that into our best case scenario blueprint. Any thoughts, additions related to the journey mapping and blueprint design? Okay. Katie?
I was just going to say that I really appreciate the reminder with the front and backstage, just because in thinking about the systems redesign lab day, I brought in Bursar and housing and financial aid for something. And I think it's really good language to think about, like, with them of what do we, both sides, right? Because we tend to operate, I think, only in our backstage without remembering how it impacts the front stage. So.
Oh, yes.
That's just good language for me. So I look forward to using that on April 14th with them as well.
Thanks, Katie. Okay, I remember Module 4 with Juliet Price from Nash, and she did our workshop around improvement science. I really loved this one so much. I thought it was just like really tangible, good stuff, like this is when you're getting into the meat of the change. And I will say, in all of the collaborative projects, the process wheel itself, those first several bubbles can take a little bit of time to get through, So it takes a little bit of time to really agree on and problem frame. And then it takes a little bit of time to make sure you have all the stakeholders at the table. And not just that you've sent them a random calendar invite to come and do a thing, but that they know why they're getting together and they're bought in. And then how much time does it take to build trusting relationships? Like, that can take some time, and you start where you are, and transparency and clear communication and appreciation, like those are all really critical elements of building trust and getting your group to kind of gel, but taking time for your group, your partners to really feel like, yes, we all have a same goal or a similar goal. We all know the what's in it for me of why I'm participating in this. And then you move into the data. That can take a little bit of time before you get to some real kind of deep dive processes that you're facilitating. And I will just say maybe the instinct is to jump to, okay, we're all here. We agree we've got an issue with advising. What are we going to do about it? And we go straight to brainstorming those big projects that we want to test, or those ideas that we want to test. We might jump straight into this kind of module 4 without really setting the groundwork and the foundation and bringing everybody along in the problem development or in the brainstorming elements. So just something that I've learned, that it is very easy to jump right into the project side of the work, but how important it is to really follow that process and make sure that everybody, when you do get to this project phase, that folks are excited and they're ready to go. And you're going to do the right things. I think that that's the other really critical piece of this. Okay, but here it is. Here's what we're actually going to do. Now we're going to do some stuff. And Juliet was a really wonderful presenter as well. So we have a model for improvement, really focusing on what are we trying to accomplish? How will we know that a change is an improvement? And what change can we make that will result in improvement? And I will talk a little bit more about the Plan, Do, Study, Act, or go over that again. But just broadly, improvement science is a systemic approach aimed at enhancing processes, products, and outcomes. And it focuses on understanding and implementing effective strategies to drive continuous improvement. Okay. One of the important elements, and this is kind of building off of maybe a how might we, that allows us to brainstorm, and then that allows us to kind of converge into the thing that we're going to do. We now need to really create a pretty solid, smart if you will, aim statement or goal statement. So aim statements are concise declarations that define the specific goals and objectives of improvement initiatives within the framework of improvement science. They provide clarity and direction for teams by articulating what they aim to achieve, aligning efforts toward measurable outcomes. So what will be improved, for whom, by how much, and by when. Those are all really important elements of an aim statement. Let's see. So this is an example from one of our transfer. Well, this is an example Juliet shared. This could be from some other area. But by May of 2030, the percentage of in-state students enrolling at two-year institutions who transfer and complete baccalaureate degrees within 6 years will increase by 7%. So that gives a very clear statement to the team of what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and by when, and by how much, and for whom. And then the team can really get to the other pieces that will help drive okay, so what are we going to do to make this impact and to hit this goal? And that is where you get to the driver diagram. So you plop your aim statement in at the beginning, and then you want to think about what are the primary moving parts, the primary processes, the primary experiences that are going to, the major factors that directly influence the achievement of our aim statement. They represent the key areas where interventions can have a specific impact. So if you're thinking of, I know we've talked a lot about transfer and whatnot, gateway course success. And let's say that you have an aim statement around improving course success rates of gateway math or co-requisite math, for first year students who are underprepared academically, within 2 years or whatnot. What might be the big drivers related to gateway course success in math? Maybe one of the key factors would be placement, or kind of that assessment of their preparedness and placing them in the right level or right section. Also, you might have another one around academic support services, that are kind of embedded in or wrapped around the student. You might have another major factor in this gateway course success around faculty mindset or faculty pedagogy approaches. You might have another one around course design. So like if you identify these are what we think are the big factors that influence overall this aim statement, then we can map backwards to our secondary drivers, if you have them, or just go straight into your change idea. And let's say that you have a primary driver around faculty mindset and the impact or the power of a faculty's belief in their students on that student's own belief in themselves and ultimate, success. Then you might try to do a change idea around a training, a professional development, some best practices or whatnot to try to influence how you're improving that one lever, that one factor, to hopefully move forward toward the aim. Now, what I do love about this is that we know that this throws away the idea that there's a silver bullet. Because if you look at any of our aim statement you come up with is going to have so many, maybe just a minimum of 4 major factors that can influence it. And so it just shows us that we need a real cross-functional team, a real multidisciplinary approach to really thinking about these complex challenges and all of the contextual pieces, and not just okay, well, if it's a math class, it's got to just be about learning math, but maybe you have a primary driver around the basic needs support of students that are in these classes. So, there's a lot of different ways, but the driver diagram itself is just a really good tool for helping you make sure that the change ideas that you come up with are going to directly influence a secondary or then a primary driver, which is one of the major factors in success of the aim statement. Okay. And so just kind of quickly running through Plan, Do, Study, Act. It's just kind of this continuous improvement process, this PDSA cycle. Planning is defining the specific change you want to test and outlining how you'll implement it. You might identify a clear aim or goal for change, develop a hypothesis of how the change will lead to improvement, determine the measures you'll use to evaluate, and create a detailed plan for implementing the change. So this is all in the plan phase. When you go to do, you will be implementing the change on a small scale to test its effectiveness. So your activities would be to execute the plan as designed, collect data during the implementation phase, and document any unexpected challenges or observations. When you go to study, this is analyzing the data collected during the do phase to evaluate the change's impact on effectiveness or impact and effectiveness. So your activities might be reviewing the data against the success measures defined in your planning phase, identify patterns, trends, and insights that emerge from the data, and discuss the results with the team to understand what worked, what didn't, and why. When you get to the act and final phase, you decide on your next steps based on insights gained from the study phase. So if the change was successful, standardize it for broader implementation. If not, determine what needs to be adjusted before further testing. And I think that we have kind of talked a little bit about what are we going to do next in the act, and the adapt, adopt, or abandon, or maybe it starts with adopt. Adopt, this worked great, let's scale, let's do more of it. Adapt, okay, it worked great for some, maybe not for all, maybe we just need to adapt it a little bit to be more effective in this particular context or with this population. Or perhaps abandon. Oh my goodness, this showed absolutely no impact whatsoever on our desired aim. And so I'm glad we, kind of did a small test of change. We're going to move on to another idea. So that's kind of that next step in the act when you're moving to scale. And this document is the PDSA needs infrastructure. If you participated in a NIC, you will this will be very familiar to you. But this is just how you this is your planning document for your overall PDSA. So I would highly recommend that you use something like this in your capstones to really kind of track out, because we only have a 4-month window, perhaps to kind of move through some of these elements of the process. And so really kind of thinking about what needs to be done, by when, by whom, what's our measurement of success, et cetera, and being really clear on, the key driver of this action plan, the problem that we're trying to solve, et cetera. Okay. So for Module 4, there was quite a bit in here. We talked about the model for improvement, Plan, Do, Study, Act, the aim statements, and how to craft really clear and focused aim statements. The tool of the driver diagram to really map out the major factors influencing your aim statement to help you backward map to what kinds of tests of change would be most high effective. Now, I didn't include this in this deck, but there are some really good slides in Juliet's presentation on process mapping. And so we did talk about journey mapping, but then process mapping is a little bit of its own thing, and those are included in the bigger deck on our continuous improvement. We talked about the Plan, Do, Study, Act approach and the infrastructure document. Any other thoughts or things that you all would like to add to this continuous improvement section? I know some of you have a lot of experience in this. Okay. And our final module was with Dana Jackson, who's a consultant for the Strive Together Network, as well as the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and she does a lot with She was also really integral in the 55,000 degrees and 15K collaborative action initiative in the Louisville area. She talked a lot about adaptive leadership and change culture. And I think reflecting, this would be a good one maybe to put closer at the beginning of the program next time, because it's so much about the relationship building and, that building of trust. And then how do you also kind of thinking about Civic Lab's approach to the complex and the complicated problems, how do you really deal with adaptive challenges? So, but, some of the most important pieces of this is just like adaptive leadership. It's not something that you can really see what is exactly coming next. You have to be very flexible. You have to be adaptable. You have to have a mindset that expects that it won't all go as you have it planned out. You have to really kind of be prepared mentally for dodging, for following the river, as you will, and to really kind of move the work forward in the direction that it almost leads you. When I was in some facilitator trainings, they would always say, whatever happens at the end of a facilitation day is exactly what was supposed to happen. And the facilitator's role is to guide, but also to follow, and to make sure that if we need to dedicate more time to a specific issue or conversation because it's really important to ultimately getting to this next step, then that's time well spent. And so instead of being frustrated that like, oh, nothing happened on my agenda that I thought was going to happen, but really instead being kind of willing to be there present with your partners and your team to make sure you're all moving forward and on the same page. One of my other favorite mantras kind of around this relationship piece is progress moves at the speed of trust, and just how important it is to have these strong relationships with partners that you're trying to do complex work with in a systems way. Okay, so thinking about what is adaptive leadership, it's a leadership model that emphasizes the need for leaders to be flexible and responsive to changing environments, particularly in complex, uncertain, or challenging situations. Does this not describe every single one of our jobs? Like, yes, we are all like really required to be adaptive leaders to be most successful, I think, in the changing landscape of education and higher education. And of course, the changing needs of students as new generations kind of come, and they all have their own personality. But the approach focuses on helping organizations and individuals navigate change and address adaptive challenges, problems that require new thinking and innovation rather than simply applying existing solutions. So this is really going to be focused on, we haven't necessarily done this before, or, maybe we can take some clues from a different experience that we've had, but it really is a unique problem or context that we're working in. Dana, really spent some time walking us through the technical challenges versus the adaptive challenges. And I think that this is also connected to Civic Lab and Jack's slides around what is a clear challenge, A plus B equals C. This is very clear. We're just going to manage it. We can apply the same solution over and over, as opposed to something that is really complex. And we haven't seen it before. It's not a clear goal. Innovation and trying new things is definitely going to be required. And as we learn how those strategies work, then we can iterate or, move forward to scale. But it certainly, these adaptive challenges do not come with a manual. And I think that, there's a lot of things in life that don't come with manuals, and we are adaptive in a lot of our scenarios. So this is obviously one of them. Okay, the adaptive leadership process, to observe, interpret, and intervene. And I love this, and it's simple. And I also love it kind of overlaid with this next slide of how do you advance leadership work or adaptive leadership work. And so when I think about the observing, to me, that references get on the balcony. You've got to observe so that you can see what's really going on. distinguishing from the technical challenges and the adaptive challenges, figuring out where people are. That's another really important part of observing, who's totally on board, who might be resistant, who would really benefit but isn't engaged yet. Listening to the song beneath the words, read the authority figures for clues. I think that that's also really important, to know like how much support do we have institutionally for this work or for this adaptive challenge. When you think about interpreting what it is that you're seeing, maybe that's more the think politically, and finding partners in this work. Who are those that are going to have maybe the biggest invested interest in working on this together. Keeping the opposition close, I guess that's really like, I've had some various experiences where they weren't an expected partner in the work, but they really did have a key role to play in if it went or didn't, red light, green light. And so really taking some extra time to learn about their priorities, to learn about the what's in it for me, to try to make the case that this is a win-win, that those are all really important components of trying to be successful in this landscape that may have some political potholes. Accepting responsibility for your piece of the mess. So of course, like all of us, like people can kind of always point fingers. Oh, well, you have this issue, or well, you do that, and this is all tied together. Well, we just need to like, oh, I would like to participate in this, and I accept that feedback, and here we go. And then I think, modeling behavior, as a facilitator, as a leader, as a convener, it's just really important to always model what it is that you hope others will also, how they'll behave, how they'll show up, how they'll ask questions, and be open-minded about what it is we're trying to do together. When I think about intervening, it makes me think about the orchestrate the conflict and also giving the work back. So that's kind of an intervention approach. So orchestrating the conflict can be controlling the temperature, controlling the pace, illuminating the future. Giving back the work is really, taking it off your shoulders, place the work where it belongs, make the intervention short and simple, offer observations, ask strategic questions, offer interpretations, and then take action. So as a facilitator, giving back the work is really important because there's a lot of different units that are all stakeholders, and they can't just think that, oh, well, the convener of this meeting is going to do all of the things. But really it's shared work, and it's shared success as well. And then this last part of holding steady is, I think, just very real. It can be tough to be the facilitator or to be the convener, especially in complex work, complex problems that don't have one clear solution center, one thing that we can do to fix it. It's really quite, there's a lot of cross-functional issues happening. So you just have to kind of hold steady. And I think that that's really wise advice. And I hope that all of us as change leaders, I'm sure we've experienced this before. We have felt some heat related to the work that we're trying to help lead and convene, but just hold steady. Let some of these issues ripen. Like, it's okay to have good, robust discussion. And keeping that attention on the issue / the student. And I think that whenever I've had, some challenging conversations around, well, I don't want to do this, or this is my process and I've always done it this way, really kind of being able to bring out an empathy map, bring out a journey map, bring out kind of, this is our aim. This is the how might we. You can kind of divert the attention from my process to how can we really best help our students, and try to kind of refocus that. Let's see. Then Dana also shared some of this really insightful approach to from the book, The Switch. Well, I don't know if I have the full title of the book here, but she referenced this book, and for for things to change, somebody somewhere has to start acting differently. Maybe it's you, maybe it's your team. But this I really like because it thinks about the rider is the rational rider, and the elephant is the emotional elephant. And then, oops, and then we also have the context, the environment, the path that we're on. And so, as the adaptive leader, you can do very concrete things in all three of these buckets, and also recognizing that it is important to have both the rational and the emotional, because so much of our work is not just going to be rational, but we also have to speak to that emotional piece inside of people. Maybe it's a fear for their jobs going away, or whatever the case may be. There could be a lot of emotions, and trying to make sure that we can find the feeling, that we can maybe even start small, think big, aim high, so that it's not, we're not jumping into the deep end of the pool and really scaring the socks off of everybody. But we're just going to start small and see how we do, and then we'll iterate, grow, and scale. And also developing your people and how important that is in this emotional work. Um, so these are really the three critical pieces. And as you think about what we can do, here's a really good chart that gives some real tangible examples for these principles. I think as you go into your own capstone work, or your broader work on your campuses, think of yourselves as adaptive leaders. Just give yourself that title. You've graduated, you are an adaptive leader. And so maybe this would be something that I would print off. And as I'm thinking about, okay, the rational side of this work, these are some things, these are some techniques I really want to use to make sure that I'm communicating the concrete, why we're doing this, following what's working, scripting critical moves and being very clear, and then keeping our eye on kind of that start small, think big, aim high. Okay. Shaping the path. I haven't really mentioned this too much, but this is also a really important area. How can you control your environment? So the path refers to the environment or context in which change occurs. It includes the systems, processes, and structures that can enable or constrain change efforts. And so leaders should work to shape the environment to make the desired behaviors easier to adopt and sustain. This can involve modifying processes, removing obstacles, or providing necessary resources. I have resisted a lot of parenting examples today, but this one makes me think so much about controlling the environment for my kids. Like, if I don't want them wearing shorts when it's 30 degrees outside, I need to remove shorts from their drawers. Or, if I am tired of them always asking me to get them a cup of water when they're 10 years old and totally capable of doing it, just make sure that the cups are at their level so they can reach them. So, like, controlling our environments and what can we do to make sure that we've removed barriers, that we've empowered our people, that we have, given them the resources or tools that might be most necessary in order to, see the change that we want. So the adaptive leadership key principles and tools that were kind of my big takeaways was just around this whole concept of adaptive leadership and what is a good adaptive leader, being able to differentiate the technical challenges from the adaptive challenges, thinking about our process, the observe, interpret, and intervene kind of process for adaptive leadership. And then also these great principles, these switch principles, which can help us if we get stuck and we're not exactly sure why. Maybe we've got a lot of emotions going on and we need to take some time there, or maybe we've got, barriers in the way that we can help shape the path and move us forward. So that is the wrap up. of kind of overview of all of the various modules and concepts and tools. And I hope that it feels a little bit more coherent, as like, yes, oh my gosh, this is an overall process for change. And these are the various tools that I know I can pull and draw on in order to keep moving my team forward. Okay. Um, I would love to take a minute and just, request your reflections on any of this, your favorite tools from the modules, the tools that you might think or concepts that you think will be most helpful as you consider your own work or your own capstone. Um, Very interested in what y'all are thinking. That was a lot of me talking, you guys.
Lily, I appreciate the recap. I'm still very like, oh right, I lean into that one. And then you go to the next one. I'm like, oh right. Like I'd already forgotten, the elephant piece. And it's like, oh. So I think that's the biggest challenge for me is still trying to operationalize all the various pieces versus trying to stick with, one model or one approach. So but I do appreciate oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I like, and I'm a paper girl. I'm like, you know what I need to do? I need a workbook.
Well, that's a great tip for next time. I
I
think
mean, right? Like just
we
some
could
kind of the high
definitely,
level things so I can
yeah,
make notes and, make my
yes,
connections as I go.
yes,
Because I have to admit, I have not kept all my notes together in a good way. So,
yeah. That's a great suggestion, Katie. And I think in our very first session, we did get a, I'm trying to pull one out. Do you guys remember this booklet, like from Jackass? He puts all his tools together for us, and that's really wonderful. I hope you still have that or can find it. Um, because this is a gold mine, and it covers so many of the things, even though it was just the first module. But yeah, I think like our own custom one that is a real good compilation of these pieces would also be a good idea. And there's no
Really,
expect.
this is
Yes.
Rebecca. And,
Hi.
of all the leadership, I guess, uh, conferences I've attended and different things, this this whole study and the way that it was put together with the modules is the most comprehensive I've ever seen. And I think it's wonderful, especially for new leaders or upcoming leaders or even older people like myself that's been in it, because it reminded me so much of some of the stuff that it was like, oh my gosh, yes, and I think to have this all together in one is absolutely wonderful. It's a gold mine. It really is.
Thank you so much for that feedback, Rebecca. Okay, well, I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie, and she is going to take us into the next phase. I'm not sure, Stephanie, if we have a break now or just waiting until our lunch at noon. Do you want me to stop sharing and then you can pick it back up with sharing? Okay.
Yeah, go for it. Let me try to share my screen. Oh, wrongs. Oh, no, that should be right. Okay, hold on. Okay, are people seeing the slides full screen? Perfect. All right, well, let's give Lily some love again in the chat or just with our emoji reactions. It really is, thanks, Barb. No small feat, I think, to recap all of those tools and resources, but putting them together succinctly and then mapping them onto this bigger project wheel or this capstone roadmap, I think helps to set us up for success without feeling too overwhelmed. Now, having said that, there is still lots of time for us to digest, right, which tools or processes we feel like would work best for our capstone project. And that's why we really wanted to carve out, a big chunk of our time together today to put folks back into their breakout groups so that you all can take a look at that together. All right. Now, before we jump into our breakout rooms, I wanted to again highlight, folks, some of our next steps that are coming up for our Capstone project and for our Leadership Exchange program. So right now we are at the end of March. Time really goes by quickly. But you'll see that we have our Capstone COP meetings coming up shortly. And then we have, again, a few short months to practice or put to test some of our small tests of change before our project kind of showcase and graduation in August. So today's really about, how can we tackle some of our next big milestones when we get together in our breakout rooms. And you'll see these next milestones in the bullets under April 12 to 15. And that is to complete the aim statement, lock in our project teams, identify our host institution, and then to take a look at our project work plan or a project outline. Okay. All right, so I was able to cover some of this during our last session together, but I know we didn't have too much time and some folks needed to head out. So I will also share a link in our Teams chat if you wanted to make reference to this kind of high-level Q&A. I would say there are 2 questions right now that have been top of mind for folks, and these are questions that were directly pulled from the feedback you all provided in our summit pre-convening, right, where we were starting to hone in on our aim statements. And the first question was, how would I know if it's a good fit for me to be a host institution? Again, because we're moving kind of from theory to practice, right, from learning throughout our last few modules to implementing IRL, right, in real life. A lot about this project is going to be determined or is going to be contextualized by the environment of the host institution. And so while all partners and participants can benefit from sample tests of change or perhaps some project documents that are being created, we do need to ground each capstone group in that host institution, which will then be the institution to work on the MOA with the collaborative so that the funding and the other accountability structures and project infrastructure pieces can be put into place. So on the screen, you'll see some of the suggestions or key considerations to keep in mind if you're thinking that you might be a good fit as that host institution, and whether your institution, not just you as an individual, but perhaps your primary team or key partners, your finance folks, right, also have the capacity to help facilitate this capstone piece. So any questions about the host institution component or anything else Lily or team may be able to help provide clarity to if you're feeling a little bit unsure?
Yeah, Stephanie, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a place, and maybe I'm just missing it, but is there a place where we can go and see like a comprehensive list of our groups and the what they're focusing on so that we can make sure that we're in the group that we want to be in?
Absolutely. I would not be doing my job if I just left you to figure it out. So we do have our leadership exchange teams, and I have pulled together our current capstone groups or our working capstone groups that were formed during the pre-convening. And folks may recall those groups were formed during the initial sign-up sheet. Right. So they're not necessarily locked in as of yet. And I know, Lily, you were thinking the magic number was going to be around 4. I know some groups have a little bit fewer or a little bit more members than 4. But today's the day where we do have about 20 some folks in this room, a good critical mass to work out, again, where the energy is in those project topics. And you might just have a larger group break out into 2 smaller groups, right? That's okay too. It's actually more money to go around. I think there's a budget of $3,500 per group. But yes, Ashley, I will do a quick screen share with the teams that everybody should have access to, and then we will put you into breakout groups and you can also access the teams to do that work. All right. Any other questions about the host institution piece? Do we have anybody who feels solid about being a host institution right now who might want to share with the group what factors they use to decide? Or okay, well, I'll let folks talk it out in the group. But I'll just touch on briefly our second Q&A that we received from the pre-convening, and that was, how do I know if the project is the right scope, right? Not too big, not too small. So here's where I'll invite you to think back to some of the recap Lily just walked us through, and those SMART goals and those specifics in the aim statements, right? So we're setting ourselves up for success. And as much as we want our direct, or we may want our direct project to ultimately impact Kentucky's 60 by 30 goal, or to ultimately increase the rate of graduation or retention at XYZ college, it's also important to think about, how to measure success in, what's the best way to put it? How to measure success, or what success might look like in different forms, right? Because you might not always be able to know, right, if we inch that much closer to the 60 by 30. Of course, in theory, it does. But you'll see in some of the draft aim statements in teams that your peers have also shared feedback around, how to get more specific around a population of choice, or how to balance the desirability and the feasibility pieces with your test of change. Okay, so I hope that helps to also give a little bit more direction. Again, think about the capacity of your team members, and try not to bite off more than you can chew, but also reach for the stars, right? And see what you'll be able to achieve together. So if you do want another, again, reference document, I will share in the chat the link to all of this information. But Nash, who facilitates the NICs, the Network Improvement Communities, which Juliet also works on, they have prepared and published examples of reports that talk about what small tests of change can look like, right? And what different measures of success might look like. So again, keep in mind Juliet's example of your test of change impacting a number of students whom you can personally take out for a cup of coffee. And while that was kind of a funny, I think, example to use, it's a reminder that if it all goes wrong, or if you're piloting something small, start small so that you can fail forward, learn from your successes. And also, in the case that it all implodes, right, you can take those group of students out for a coffee, apologize, maintain the relationship. So I think that was a, humorous, but a good example of how to stay grounded with scope. All right. Okay. So without further ado, folks, I'm just going to hop on over to Teams, and feel free to follow along. Is everybody seeing my Teams up on the screen? Yes, perfect. Oh, let me put into the chat for you all. Here we go. If you need a direct link. So you've got the February 26 slides with the Q&A we just did, right? Prompts for considering the host institution, the scope, and then you also have a link to our leadership exchange Teams. If you are on Teams already, you can just look for this little icon. It's a light bulb in a gear in collaborative blue. So I know there's Tiffany blue, but now we have collaborative blue. There isn't anything in the posts, but if you go into files, folks, hold on. In the general channel is where you'll find examples of Capstone projects and templates, and then again, some of the materials from our former modules. You can also find this on the Impact Exchange as well, but I know a couple folks requested it for it to be on Teams, so you can copy or duplicate templates to work on, and so we've added them here for you too. Folks, if you look on the bottom left-hand corner here, where my cursor is, you'll see this is where each of the channels, right, break out by Capstone projects. Now, you're welcome to come up with a more fun or cooler name for your group, but right now they are just named according to the project topic. So if we take, I don't know, FGS engagement and retention as an example, and you go into files, that's where you'll find your draft aim statement from the pre-convening summit, as well as the names of members who were at that session. Give it a second to load. Right, so that should look familiar. Right, we've got attendees. These are your working group members, not working group, but your current group members, right? Your draft aim statement, and then you have a picture of the aim statement we worked on together with some of your comments and feedback from colleagues. All right, so this is where we're going to start or spend a little bit of time, just about 15 to 20 minutes before lunch. All right, and the objective today is to think about, again, and you can reflect on your aim statement too. It's been a few weeks, right, or about a month or so. So you may have a different perspective now looking back where you can tailor it down a little bit more. And check in with your group members, right? Do you feel like you would want to break out into smaller groups? Do you have a better idea of who a host might be? These are some of the milestones we're hoping to help folks move along during our time together today. Okay. So here, folks, are our current capstone groups. And Lily, because I think you're the only host here, can you see if you can initiate breakout rooms? I want to make this easy for you. So Lily, just try 5 rooms. Okay. Titled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then on the screen, folks, I invite you, when you get a prompt, to join the room that either your name is on. Yes, that is your number. Now, we could do even, or yeah, why don't we do 1 to 5? And then for folks who don't have a group or you're not sure, right, we can stay in the main room and we can talk with you about that, because we do have about 30 or so participants in our cohort, and that would work out to about 6 or so groups. So let's do that. And whenever you're ready, Lily. Okay, so folks can see my team's okay again, right? What I've gone ahead and done, folks, just over the lunch break, is to add the additional breakout group we had for first gen students and financial literacy. And I've also added the numbers for each of the groups, just in case it's an easier way for you to keep track of where you were today. Again, because not everybody in the cohort is able to join us at every meeting. I do understand the how do I call it? I guess the iterative approach with group forming and the development of aim statements. But again, just using an example, if you are in the first generation student belonging group and you head over to files, you'll find your draft aim statement and the project proposal outline. And so if you did work with your group to develop an aim statement during the pre-convening, you'll find that here now populated with some of your feedback from peers. And remember, this was the feedback that you got via sticky notes or via group discussion. So the idea here is that when your group is able to reconvene, and we will ask you to schedule a group meeting check-in with your capstone group, and to invite Lily and I, that you'll have done some work in this project outline document to again solidify your aim statement and also to identify your host institution and some of your key partners. All right, so we don't have to go through everything today, but please do open up this document also in Word. If you are looking to edit it, it'll work a little bit better than just working through the web app. And you'll find each section does line up with that capstone roadmap wheel that Lily spoke about earlier today. So you can pull in templates or examples from the front stage, backstage. If you do need some help creating some templates, let's say through Miro, I know Lena Blackstock used Miro for the group mind mapping component, and no one on your Capstone group is able to figure that out, then please don't hesitate to just give us a quick shout and we'll find a way to get that set up for you as well. I know it can be a little bit tricky working on a group project over the internet, but we'll do our best to help you get that going. Okay, so for each one of the Capstone groups, you do have, like I mentioned, your own channel and your corresponding project outline with your corresponding draft aim statement. All right. However, if you are in a new group like the financial literacy group, right, or if transfer ends up breaking out into 2 smaller groups, do let us know. So again, you would have a different proposal outline and you'll have to come up with your own aim statement for your group. Okay. All right. So as of present, folks, these are our current Capstone groups updated. And this, I think, is important to discuss in our larger group, just in case we need to make any additional adjustments or changes. Happy to share this after our meeting today. We'll save everything in Teams. Is this representative of where folks are as of today? I know, Leslie, you said you would circle back with Katie because we had you in a couple different groups. And we did have a few members of group 1 who were not in attendance today, but were at the pre-convening.
I'm not sure. So I'd initially signed up for group 1, but then when I went back to look at the list that we had signed up for, I was, really interested in the proactive advising strategies for first-year students in general. But I don't know if anybody else has been discussing that, or I almost need like I don't know, what is that called when I can't make a decision? That's where I am right now. Analysis paralysis. That is how I'm feeling, because I want to do everything. They're all exciting topics. Well, I don't want everybody to have to try to sway me to make my mind up, but also I know that I'm interested in the proactive advising. So
is there a summary, like a 1-page summary of what focus each group has yet? We're not there yet.
Yep, so that is on Teams. And we've had the 1-pagers we've had it up since after our summit, so around mid-February. But I know some of that has also changed today because we had additional folks join or move groups. So I'm happy to update that document. Maybe what I'll do is I'll go back to our original project sign-up sheet and I can compile all of the aim statements for each of the groups. We'll have a kind of last call for group sign-up, and then maybe that'll help us lock in our groups a little bit more.
Yeah, because some of us couldn't access this information, so. But we're good now.
I see lots of comments in the chat. Thank you, folks.
Stephanie, I'm making the updates in the document right now, but I guess it's just not refreshing on your screen here, but I'm in the shared document, so hopefully they'll all show up eventually.
Do you mean the slides or the
the slides? I mean the slides.
Okay.
Yeah. I see Katie Adamczyk in 4 and 6. Katie, which is this the same thing? You just renamed it? Because I see Leslie's also in that 4.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think that's what happened is that because Leslie and I, when we were at the summit, talked about, we were in the financial aid and support and talked about first gen students' financial literacy. So
Okay.
I think 4 doesn't actually exist. And then I should be in 6. And Heidi Neal also joined me this earlier today in that room. So
Okay. I've got that update. Sandra's in 5. You're already there. And Heidi's in 4, which is now 6.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay. Um,
I can see the changes, Lily. Let me just hit the refresh
okay.
and it should be okay.
Um,
Okay, there we go.
okay.
I'll just make that a little bit smaller. Thanks so much, Lily, for doing that.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just adjusting, but feel free to update. It looks like we have, let's see, our group 5 around transfer and advising is a little large. Did you guys discuss 2 focus areas, like maybe 2 host institutions on the same like topic, or did you want to try to stick it out as one big project?
There were only 3 of us in the group today, 3 or 4 of us in the group today, so not everybody was there. But we are going to have to, whether we stick with 1 or go with 2, we're going to have to change what we originally had because it was originally focused around students and they'll be gone soon. So we're going to have to change. We're going to have to pivot.
Okay, I get it. And then kind of the same with group 1, 6 folks on the first gen student belonging. We could, if there would be an interest in having the same topic, the same aim statement, but 2 host institutions that kind of mirrored each other's kind of process, or you wanted to try it on 2 campuses with teams of 3, we could do that. I don't want you to take something that you don't want to, like, it's super important that you are very excited and that this project is relevant, in your daily world. Just throwing it out there, if 2 campuses wanted to host and then you kind of had teams of 3, that way everybody gets their hands dirty. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so Lily, it looks like we have just the 5 groups. I just want to
5
make sure
groups are great. I love these topics. And I think that, if Stephanie and I meet with each of these groups individually to kind of think through, okay, how are you guys like looking at this? Tell us more, kind of a thing. Then we can just provide any kind of advice or guidance. If this is, oh yeah, you've got a really big project here, you're going to need 6 people on this team, kind of an insight. Just want to make sure people really feel like they get to practice pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I might be able to make the facilitation grants a little bit larger if we only have 5 teams. I'll take a look at the budget and get back to you all as well.
Thanks, Lily. So I've just gone ahead, folks, and updated our teams accordingly, right? 1, FGS student belonging, 2, gateway, 3 is mental health and well-being, 4, transfer and advising, and then 5, FGS and financial literacy. And so far, we've updated all of the comments in the chat and moving around to what is on the slide on the right. Is that correct?
I believe so. There's any other updates? Ashley is interested in all the aim statements for the different groups. I think probably to just get a better, do we want to just go around the room and have each group kind of do a quick overview?
Yeah,
You-
I'm happy to do that. And they're all in teams, so I can open those up. If we want to stay in a big group, then that could help folks to get a better idea of what's in the works. Okay. So let me full screen the teams then. And again, feel free to walk through with me if you like on your computer. So you've got group 1, FGS student belonging. You've got your draft aim statement. And so this was, again, remember, a recap of what took place at the summit and the original group members there. This is their draft aim statement.
That looks more like a how might we, because the aim statement is really like detailed, like by, when, for whom, how much,
Yes.
those kind of things. So
Yes, that's right. Thanks, Lily. So we did start with a how might we statement just because there was a little bit more of a template that Lena had provided us with to get us started. But as we discussed at the summit, you are encouraged and expected to really concretize those with some key parameters around like your SMART goals, right? By, when, for whom, how much, so on and so forth. But at least pen to paper, right? Group 1 was thinking on working around how might we incentivize engagement through orientation or Blackboard for first generation students at a community college in order to increase fall to fall retention. And there were some points of feedback that were also shared by peers during our pre-convening. So is there a specific population within the first gen students, a specific program maybe that you wanted to test your or try your test of change with? Which community college will be hosting this project, right? Are you going with orientation or Blackboard? Because that can look different, or that could be really two separate projects, one to focus on orientation, one for Blackboard. And is there a specific, start and end point for fall to fall retention? So depending again on the host institution, where's fall to fall retention right now? Maybe not broadly for the entire college, but for this particular program or this particular major. And by what amount did you want to increase fall to fall retention by? Right. And when we say fall to fall, are we talking about 1 year in the future? Right. Well, your capstone team, granted, we'll have graduation in August, but nothing stopping your capstone team from continuing to meet, to network and support each other in these endeavors or in this project work. So do you intend to check back on that fall to fall retention this time next year, or is there a different success metric that also relates to retention that you might look at, in the spring, or a pre and post after a semester, for example? So if you are a member of group 1, again, this should highly resonate with you.
Could group
not
1 share
everybody's-
out, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure things might have even changed since the last time they had that aim statement. Does anybody want to share out in group 1?
So I think I was in group 1. I think our thought we were digging into a population that I believe Ashley was working with at her college. And so some of the specific things you may have asked for, we may not have discussed because we had a really sort of broad understanding of what we wanted to do. But just thinking that a community college would be a better fit for the programming aspect of what we might want to dive into.
Thanks, Kayla. Anybody else from group 1 want to chime in? Okay. All right, so maybe we'll move on to group 2. We've got Gateway Courses and Student Success with JC Gregory, Savannah Sipple McGraw, Rebecca Johnson, who I think had to leave a little bit earlier today, Ashley Garrett, and Kasha Miller. So again, we're just going to go to teams into the Gateway channel. And again, you'll find your draft aim statement here. Okay, so there's a lot of work that this group did. And I think, Lily, you were supporting this group when we were meeting at the pre-convening. So lots of feedback that was shared as well. The draft aim statement as it currently stands for group 2 is how might we increase transition from adult education to post-secondary programs by providing a free adult learner workforce-focused FYE for adult ed participants at one KCTCS college in order to increase enrollment in college credit courses.
And this group might have gone a totally different direction because I know JC isn't even here today.
No,
Does anybody
JC's
want to?
Yeah,
Oh, is he
JC's
here?
not.
Oh,
He wasn't in the group. This group has never met with all the members, so there was a conversation that took place at the pre-convening that put us in this direction, which was it's not really about Gateway Course Success anymore. It's more about adult ed matriculation, honestly, which is fine. I mean,
yeah. Well, I think whatever direction y'all, I mean, yeah. So what did you guys talk about today, Kasha?
we didn't get a chance to talk about it today because we were still trying to get into all the documents and everything. But at that time, one of the ideas was essentially partnering with the David Potter project with his pre-college program for adult ed students and seeing if we can't do like a think of a 1-day summer bridge type thing where we could get anybody who was interested in attending KCTCS really to participate and go over and really help them with that transition to the community college enrollment. Specifically, not just college in general, which is what the program is doing, that graduation to greatness, but much more specific to, okay, if you want to be successful at a KCTCS college, these are the things you need to know, and getting them familiar with the technology, the platforms, getting advising. We could have very specific advising for that group. I am talking off the top of my head, by the way. I deal with summer bridge programs, so I have a semi vision of what this would be. But the group has not actually had this conversation. So don't hold me accountable to any of this.
Thanks, Kasha. I know it's, like I mentioned earlier, a bit tricky when we're not all able to gather at the same time, but hopefully, I know this is our last big group meeting, module 6 out of 6, which is, I think, a huge accomplishment in and of itself. But moving forward, we'll be meeting in the Capstone smaller groups, whether each group has a volunteer that wants to send out a poll or Lily, I'm happy to help with that as well if it makes it easier for folks. So hopefully within our smaller groups, we will be able to find that hour to get everybody to join the group, and we'll be able to, again, concretize and say, okay, these are the group members. This is the aim statement. We're all here now, and spend just a little bit more time and focus on the group of 4 or 5. So I appreciate that, Kasha. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and for your patience in this iterative process. Any other comments for group 2 or adult ed? Whether you're on the group or you're just a colleague who wants to share some thoughts. Right. Okay, folks, I will go ahead and move into group 3. So this is our mental health and well-being group with Laura Vance, Barb Tipmore, Chris Hetherington, Matt Purdy, and Emily Weidman. I think it's Weidman. Somebody correct me. So we've got just about 5 folks in that group. And then again, going into our teams for group number 3. And taking a look at the draft aim statement. There we go. Oh, I do see some people here. Okay. Laura, Ashley. Okay, thanks folks for joining us on the doc. So this group's draft aim statement is as follows. How might we equip instructors with response models for responding to students with mental health related concerns in order to increase confidence in responses? So we did have the draft handout again, and then some comments and feedback from colleagues. I know folks are still tinkering away on the verbiage you want to use and thinking again about specific demographics. Is there anything that members of group 3 would like to share out from your brief discussions today? Any new directions or just questions or comments?
We are trying to narrow. Yeah, sorry. We are trying to narrow our scope because this is pretty broad, and we're a blended group with community college and 4-year. So that's the conversation we were engaged in today, is how we can kind of hone that aim statement.
Thanks, Laura.
Yep. Good job.
I also just want to throw out there that your team can be as totally different institutions as you can be, and still with a focused host institution. The participants might, the team, I mean, maybe everybody won't get as much a direct applied this worked in this context, I can try it in mine. If we think that we have so many different contexts that we can't really do all the things with one project. But what the team is really getting is you're bringing your diverse perspectives as facilitators and adaptive leaders to helping move this one project forward that is really the skill building of the change leadership. So I know I would encourage whoever is kind of stepping up as the host institution to make sure that the project is going to really be relevant at your institution, because that's where that's where the change will take place. And then for the team, just kind of seeing your role as a collaborative co-facilitator, co-leader, co-designer, but it's okay if it's not directly going to connect to your role or your institution in the same way, because that could be really hard to try to meet everybody's programmatic needs when one of the main learning outcomes of this project is just the facilitator experience, the change leadership experience itself. So just kind of throwing that out there.
Thanks, Lily. Any other notes from group 3 or colleagues with suggestions or comments? All right, I'll navigate over to our next group. We've got group number 4, Transfer and Advising, with Chris Jensen, who I don't believe was able to make it today. We've got Sandra Kimberlane, who is here, Patty Dillon, who is here, Sarah Stevens, who I believe is here, Chris Butcher, who is not, and then Beth, who has joined us today. So head over to Transfer and Advising. Oh,
But the one
Jamie?
we posted isn't relevant anymore, so we don't have a new one yet.
No worries, Sandra.
So I'm just going to name the elephant in the room. A lot of us were talking about initiative fatigue and how taking on another project right now when we have so much going on at work feels like a heavier lift than perhaps it should, although we all had some ideas about how we could practice or work with the tools that we've been introduced to. But I think we've decided we're going to try to concentrate on how we can smooth the pathways between the 2 years and the comprehensives. So that way we all get something out of it. We're going to talk about coordinating, advising, policies and practices, as well as thinking in particular about the applied associate degrees. Because we know there's already a lot of work going on around that. So we thought we could capitalize on some of that and then try to bring something new to the work that's currently ongoing. That sounds appropriate, Sandra, to what we talked about?
Yes.
All right. Sounds like a good plan. It sounds like a refining for sure of some next steps. So any comments from colleagues or words of encouragement, words of caution and encouragement for group 4? Okay. Well, last but certainly not least, we've got group number 5, first generation students and financial literacy. So I did create a channel for this new group, but the aim statement, I think, is TBD, right? So I've duplicated the documents, or no, you folks had a working statement from the summit, but it could have since changed. So you added some notes today. Awesome. Okay, so your draft aim statement here is how might we better understand the cost and options for first generation and low income students throughout the college life cycle through financial literacy, financial counseling, and programmatic efforts in order to improve fall to fall retention. It's great that folks have been brainstorming on this document because then everything's available in one place. And again, you may just refine it and have it at the very bottom as the final kind of aim statement through this iterative process. So Heidi and Katie, did either of you want to speak towards some of your conversations today or what this process was like for you?
Well, I'll just say that I'm curious what the other group that was in the first gen group talked about. So Heidi was on her way back to Moorhead from Louisville, so I was and she was not able to join us at the summit, so I was kind of catching her up. And then Olivia joined us, and we were I tried to note some of our thoughts and conversation points so that we didn't forget those. And so just kind of what we had talked about at the summit and where we were and looking at the documents together. Or well, let me say this. Olivia and I looked at the documents together, and then we talked to, we shared what we were looking at with Heidi, and checked out also this KY stats page and some data on, you know, cost of attendance and things that's out there. So.
And I would say, Katie, as you updates in the other group, well, I think we spent the initial part of our time like splitting up the group to talk about belonging. So we split up into first gen and belonging, and then literacy. And I shared what we had talked about when we were together at UK, but really didn't make any. There was no changes. Like we was like, we're gonna put some people together and get back together and talk through this again. But I do like kind of these initial thoughts of like a larger like statewide partnership.
Yeah. Nope, that's great. And Katie, I appreciate you and Olivia working to catch folks up who weren't able to make it to the summit, but also the fact that you mentioned looking at the websites of some potential partners, right? And looking at KY stats, because one of the things that Lily spoke about in that Capstone roadmap or that big picture wheel is once we've, you know, established our how might we, and then our specific aim statement with measurables, right? Once we've assembled our team, we've identified our host institution, the next big milestone is around identifying our current state picture. And when we say state in this context, we don't mean the current picture of all of Kentucky, but how do things currently look like in or at your host institution, right? So that would entail maybe looking at some baseline metrics, right? Where we're starting from with retention, like I mentioned earlier, where we're going, making reference to KY stats, speaking with your partners to get an understanding of where they feel like you are, right, as a baseline, or where they feel like it might be feasible to go next. And so I think those are helpful thoughts to or helpful conversations to have, rather. So thanks for sharing that out. Any other notes or feedback for group 5? Okay. Maybe I'll pause here and also ask folks, I mean, as we work on teams and as we just walk through together, right? Each of the aim statements are found in each of the corresponding channels. Right now, all the channels are open, so everybody can kind of see everything else. I don't know if there's a preference or an intention, and Lily, feel free to advise as well if each channel needs to be private or if that would help people find things a little bit easier. But just as a FYI, these are all open. So if you did want to peek in at how other aim statements are coming along, if you feel like that would be helpful in your own process, you are able to do that too. Okay. So I would suggest as your group continues to meet, using the draft aim statement document to solidify, and Lily and I can check in with you on that as well. And maybe when we do have kind of an updated version 2, we can highlight that and do another share out at an upcoming COP meeting with the broader group. And then Lily, we can also just do a double check for all of our cohort participants, if we're missing anybody else, to let them know that this is a kind of last call, end of March, early April, to join a group, and then we'll have these locked in very shortly as well. All right, so thanks everybody for doing that. Okay. So folks, I know we are still in the process of solidifying our aim statements, but I just wanted to give you a heads up of what is coming next. And for folks who were present at the summit, you would have seen an example of this project proposal. So to help folks move along, the Capstone roadmap, Lily and I had created a proposal template with just some key questions to prompt your thinking around, what does that current state picture look like? What might the future state picture look like, right? What is your vision of success? How might you measure success? What is your kind of basic budget for this project? A few things you might think about purchasing or using to facilitate additional conversations, as well as, of course, your Capstone team members. So this is a template that is also available on Teams. It's right under your draft aim statement. It's kind of the part 1, part 2. And this is where, when we do meet in our more specific Capstone small groups, we can also walk through this document together. I will mention that this document does provide a template for the driver diagram that Juliet spoke to us about in Module 5. Right, with the primary and secondary drivers. So that's something that you're welcome to use as well. And it should just be as easy as clicking and typing. So there's no need to go to Miro and create a new template with new boxes and things like that. However, if that is your preference, right, feel free to use any and all of the tools available to you or any accounts that you might have to facilitate those conversations. I think maybe the other important thing to mention is that all the tools that we reviewed today, folks, are also there for you to utilize. And there's not necessarily a mandatory tool, right, Lily, that people have to use this for this step or this for that step. We have made some suggestions and everything's been shared, but we also hope that you feel empowered with some ownership over your project, and you can see our former modules as options on the menu, right, for you to review and think about what works best for your group and for your project. Okay, so that is workshopping the project proposal. Again, a live doc that we can build on together and something that's open access between each of the team's channels. So let me pause there. Are there any comments or questions about the project proposal? Okay. All right, folks. Well, maybe we can wrap up a little bit early if there aren't any other questions. I did have, again, our next steps, right? I showcased this on the screen a little bit earlier today. We're thinking of planning some of those initial Capstone group check-in meetings between April 2nd and 15th. Reason being, our first Leadership exChange Capstone Community of Practice meeting is taking place in mid-April. So again, those are monthly from April to July and are optional, but highly encouraged for Capstone group members to attend. And we are going to have one of our former facilitators from each of our former modules, Jack, Hess, Lena, I always forget her last name, for module 2 and 3, Julia Price and Dana Jackson, facilitating one of these communities of practice. So they're able to provide some suggestions or insights into your project as well. But in order for us to be kind of on the same page and have a better idea of what we want to speak to them about, the initial check-in in early April is where we hope, we'll be able to solidify some of those statements so that we feel prepped and ready to go for additional feedback. Okay, so would it help maybe if thanks so much, Lily, for putting that in the chat. I'm happy to help coordinate some of those meetings if folks like. We have all your names now for the various groups, so I can follow up to our session today. Of course, Lily will send out the post-session notes. I think we usually have the survey form, right? Links to resources in the impact exchange. Then we can also share a poll for each of our capstone groups and hopefully get those meetings scheduled out. Lily, anything you wanted to add about some of those next steps?
Sounds great.
Okay. All right, so that's really it. Usually our last slide says see you at the next module, but there is no next module really. So we'll see you at the capstone check-in.